All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, welcome to our Intro to Branding and Marketing webinar. This is the first in our branding and marketing series, and we're really excited that you're here and that we're going to share this with you. So, this webinar is for you if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, or startup, or even if you're just thinking about being a business owner. It's never too early to start thinking about this, and we really encourage it. It's also for you if you have a job related to branding and marketing. It's always good to know what other people are saying and get resources that way. And it's also for you if you aren't happy with your current branding and marketing strategy and you want to rethink it.
Yeah, we understand that sometimes navigating the branding and marketing world can feel really overwhelming. There's just so much to know. And that's why we've created this webinar. We want to make sure that you're getting started on the right foot. And we want to really give you topics that are often misunderstood, underutilized, or done incorrectly. And that's why we really appreciate that you guys are attending this live, because this shows that you understand the importance of branding and marketing and the impact it can have on your business. And so, you can either see the massive amount of information there is to know about branding and marketing as this vast abyss, or as a universe of opportunity waiting to be explored. And you just need to know how to navigate it properly. And that's what we're here to do today, is we're here to help you navigate that well.
Yeah, definitely. So you might be wondering, who are these random voices that you're hearing? So why don't we introduce ourselves? All right. So hi, I'm Kelly Shields. I'm the creative lead and brand architect for Benu Creative. And what I do is I oversee the design and creative aspect to our projects. I really love getting to see the potential in a business come to life and witness their owner's passion for what they do. I always like to say that being an entrepreneur is an adventure. And when I'm not working, one of my favorite hobbies is actually baking. My maiden name was Baker, so I think that's kind of fitting. And the Great British Baking Show is one of my favorites, and it's something I enjoy to watch while in the kitchen.
And I'm Gabriel Shields. I've always been in love with poetry and storytelling, which is probably what actually drew me to marketing and branding. Because as a strategic manager and marketing innovator, I get the privilege of helping people to tell their stories in compelling ways that make people want to know more about them. And so what I do is I actually spend most of my night studying psychology, the art of storytelling, history, and that's just for fun. But the awesome thing is that the next day I usually get to apply that in the way that I develop relationships, and I get to do those things at the same time. I get to develop relationships with my clients. And so right now, fun fact about me is I'm actually working on finishing my first short story by the end of this year. So hopefully that works out.
Awesome. So now you know a little bit about us. We're going to jump into our agenda next, because again, our hope is that you come away from this webinar with a firm understanding of what branding and marketing is about. This is really just a top level view, but branding and marketing is so important, and we really want to take this time to make sure you understand this concept properly. So on the branding side, what we're going to talk about is what it really is, how to establish a strong brand, and the different components of a good brand. On the marketing side, we're going to talk about how to create a great experience, to create a website that converts. And we're also going to talk about SEO and content, and then how to generate leads. And just as a housekeeping reminder, make sure to ask questions in the chat box so we can review them at the end. And you'll also receive a recording afterwards and a PDF summarizing the key points and helpful resources. So don't worry about taking a bunch of notes. We're going to send you guys that info anyway.
Yeah, and we're just about to dive deep into this. Kelly's going to start off by really laying down the groundwork and the foundation with branding, and I'm going to follow up talking about marketing, because what we're hoping is that your main takeaway, what we really want you to come away with, is really understanding the difference between marketing and branding and how to effectively implement the strategies for both. Because it's really important to know that marketing is not your message. Branding is your message. And marketing is just simply going to be the catalyst, the vehicle in which you carry that message. And that's why I want to hand it over to Kelly to be able to unpack really what branding is and how it's different from marketing, so that when I follow up with that, you can see how we can effectively take that message and get it out to the right people and the right audience. So go ahead and take it away, Kelly.
Awesome. So let's get started with branding. So really, branding is kind of a confusing term to people. They don't really know what it is. And if you were even to look it up in the dictionary, it's also not that clear. It's kind of just a bunch of words that honestly don't mean a lot. So if you're unsure of what branding means, you're definitely not alone. People commonly think your brand is synonymous with your business's name. If someone asked you what brand of clothing you like, you would probably say the company name, like Nike, Adidas, Ralph Lauren. The other scenario is that people have a logo and they think that's enough to have a brand. What we want to emphasize is that branding is not just logos, fonts, and colors. These are simply the outputs and surface level components of your brand. So to understand this concept a little further, let's look at the American flag as an example. So what do you see? There's stars, there's stripes, there's red, white, and blue. Anything else? So it's pretty clear that a flag is symbolic of its country. If you saw a white flag with a red dot in the center, you'd automatically know it's Japan. If you saw one that was red, white, and blue with 3 different segments, you know that that was France, right? So every component of a flag is incorporated to represent something, even the colors. It wasn't created just because the design looked nice. When you look at the flag, it often invokes an emotional feeling, whether it's good or bad. To most, it would represent the American dream, right? The desire for independence. Both individuals and as a collective, they can identify with it because it means that you're joining something bigger than yourself. And the flag is an enduring symbol. Even though it's been altered and changed over the years, the core concept and look of it is the same. You could almost say that the flag is the logo of the United States. It represents the US, but the flag isn't what makes America America. Remember, the US was developed way before the flag was ever created. So this same concept can be applied to branding. Let's imagine that your brand is a person. To do this, we'll focus on 3 traits that you'll find in a person and compare that to a brand. We're going to talk about the core, the character, and the composition. And then we're going to translate that into the business world. So if we focus first on the core of a person, we're going to start with the heart or the soul, right? This is what drives them. This is their why they exist. This translates into the mission and values of your business. We'll unpack this more later, but consider what is driving the reason for starting or continuing your business. The brain of the person is what operates the body. In business terms, this is your business plan, the strategy of your business and how it will actually function. Remember that both the brain and the heart are vital to living. So why would you ever try to create a business without them? Moving on to the character, let's talk about personality. People can be super friendly and casual, or maybe they're a little more professional and formal when you meet them. In business terms, this relates to the overall customer experience with your brand. If you go to Dutch Brothers, you're going to expect a friendly, laid-back atmosphere. But if you were to go to a law firm, you'll probably experience a much more professional and formal atmosphere. On the flip side, if you were to go to a law office and they start acting like the people at Dutch Brothers, that would probably be very confusing to you, and it might even affect your opinion to do business with them, right? Because you'd be wondering if they're taking what you're bringing to them seriously. Make sure that the personality of your business fits the product or service that you're providing. The other thing to consider is mannerisms. Think of it like customer interaction. Do you use a handshake or a hug to greet someone? At the same token, are you actively listening to your audience and taking their feedback, or are you just charging ahead and just doing what you want to do? This is really important to consider. The speech of a person is also something that distinguishes them. Some people have accents. Some people use big words or simple words. This all correlates to the tone of voice for your business. You can be relaxed or formal. And what this translates to is your body copy. This shows up in your website, in your email, greetings, phone calls, social media, really just about everywhere. So for example, when you start an email, do you say, "Dear Mr. Smith," or do you say, "Hi, John"? Next part of character that we're going to talk about are interests. So just like how people have interests, whether it's sports, arts, maybe they like to volunteer, maybe they're a do-it-yourself kind of person, your business also can have interests. And that's going to correlate to what it's invested in. Now, this isn't just monetary investment. Okay, it can be shared interests with other businesses. Maybe it leads to a collaboration or a networking. Maybe your business chooses to do a give back sort of program to the community. It's really talking about what your company invests in. So once you have the core and the character of your brand, then you move on to the appearance or the composition. So one of the first things that you notice about a person in the overall look or appearance is what they're wearing, their clothing. This is also similar to a business. What is the physical impression people have of your business? They'll get this in the overall aesthetic of your store layout, of your website, of your marketing material, of your social media. And it really is important when you're making a first impression. Coloring is also something to consider. People are born with a natural skin tone, eye color, hair color, and they'll wear clothing or style themselves to complement that natural coloring. Okay, in business terms, this is going to relate to your color palette. You can have cool or warm colors, light or dark. This all affects your content, both printed and digital. And to have a color palette means that you can maintain consistency across all of those platforms. So one example is Instagram, right? It's very common that you'll have a color profile in your theme. The last part of composition that I want to talk about is styling. This really relates to the kind of the personality, right? Each individual person has their own style. So in business terms, this is going to be the little flourishes in your brand that adds personality, such as your fonts, your icons, and even your photography style. So remember in this example that the overall appearance of this person, quote unquote, would be represented by your logo, while the entire person, remember the core and the character, is your brand. Let's take a look at a real example of how a brand can be a person. Oprah is a great example of being her brand because she can't be separated from it. She is it. The name of her business is her name. The logo is her name in some fancy lettering. The tone of voice is her voice. The values and goals of hers are the business's values and goals. Her website is even Oprah.com. Her network is named after her. If you look at this example, all of this was put together because it represented her brand. You look at the color of her shirt and you see it matches the color of the fonts. The Oprah part even looks like her signature. Her hair is giant. She's almost larger than life. This is all styled after her brand. And this is just one way to brand. You brand yourself. So this is really common if you're an individual in your business, if you're something like a real estate agent, a motivational speaker, a consultant. The other ways to brand is your business as an entity, so you remove yourself from it, or as a branded product. And sometimes they can even be all three. If we take Apple, for example, you have your iPhone or iPod as a branded product, whereas Apple as a business is the brand. And then you could even have Steve Jobs as the branded person, right? When someone thinks Apple, they often think of Steve Jobs. So going back to the idea that if your brand was a person, how would you describe it? What is your dating profile, so to speak? We like to put it through a blind date test. If your brand was going on a date with a random stranger, what would that person think of your brand? Just because you think you're funny doesn't necessarily mean your date will. It's all about how other people will perceive it, right? So to do this in a more literal sense, what you want to do is get feedback from people who don't know your business. Don't give them much context because that could sway their opinion, and don't ask friends and family because they might not really give you an honest opinion, right? You can do polls or surveys, but even in networking situations, Pull up your website, product, whatever you're working on, and say, can I get your opinion on something? I'm doing a little research and I'm wanting to get people's first impression on this. And then pull up your project. Get their feedback and maybe even follow up with them on it later. And then you have a connection. So again, if your brand's on a date, what is their date going to find out about them? Because the ultimate goal is that you want your end customer to commit to a long-term relationship with you, right? It's so much easier to sell to current customers than it is to go fishing all over again and start from scratch. Make sure that you're making a good first impression, and definitely avoid having multiple personality disorder. That gets super confusing and people will avoid you like the plague. All right, so now that we've kind of defined what a brand is all about, let's talk about what makes a good brand. And again, you want to start off with your values and your mission statement. So think about why your business exists. What does your brand represent? What are some of your long-term goals? Because again, remember, your mission and values is the heart of your brand. Your business can't exist without it. And with that, you want to consider what your unique value proposition is. Components of that, again, is why you exist. Is it to help others? Is it to solve a problem? To raise awareness? Really consider why your business exists and if it's necessary in the market. Once you've got that figured out, think about how you're different. What you're trying to do is set yourself apart from your competition, and say why someone should choose you over your competitor. And finally, you want to be concise. If you can't describe who you are or what you do in simple terms, then the reality is that you don't really know. So for example, I could say that at Benu Creative, we help small and developing businesses find their visual and digital identity in a personal and customized way. Make sure you really know who you are. It's also really vital to define your target audience. Can you identify that? Do you know who your ideal customer is? What a common mistake is for people is that they try to please too many people. It's too broad. So for example, if you want to make a business out of your grandma's secret cookie recipe, you might think your target market is everyone in the country who eats cookies. I mean, that would be great, but that's probably not realistic, right? Because there are certain factors that limit your reach. Are you going to have a brick and mortar store, or are you going to ship your cookies? And if you ship them, how long do they stay fresh? How many flavors will you have? Does that limit people that have allergies? And will everyone be able to afford to buy more than just one cookie at a time? Really take the time to research and understand your ideal customer. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time, resources, fishing in a spot where the fish just aren't biting. So if we relate it back to dating, is your brand also interested in its date? Just because someone is in love with you doesn't really mean that you have to be in love with them. Trying to please everyone will just stretch you too thin. So make sure that you don't compromise your values just to appease the masses. All right, just like in dating, don't be the person who changes themselves to catch any guy or girl. It means you don't really know who you are, and it's confusing to others in the end, and it really isn't what's best for you. Once you figure out your target market, then you can narrow it down to your ideal customer, or your customer avatar is another way to put it. So consider all these components that make up your ideal customer. Think about what their age or their gender would be. The location, occupation, and income is a big one. Are you priced right to appeal to your target customer? And then see if the values and goals and interests that they have are similar to your own. Remember that business is relational. And sometimes it's just your values and goals that separate you from your competition. If people can relate to them, then that helps define you. So all of these aspects will affect how you brand and market to your target customer. All right, so we've gone through the core and the character. Let's now focus on putting it all together and making a good first impression on the appearance. Because remember, first impressions count. So let's talk about logos. Your logo is the symbol of your brand. So you have different types of logos. One of them is the typography mark. All right, so you can have a letter mark, which is just simply like the initials, or a word mark, which is the full name. This can be a nice, relatively inexpensive way to start out when you're just trying to get your name out there and get brand recognition. It's also great if you are branding yourself as a person, because a lot of times it's going to be your name or initials here. A very common type of logo that people go for when they start out is the combination mark. Okay, that combines the word mark, so again, your company name, with an actual icon or pictorial part. What's nice about a combination mark is that it's very versatile and you have multiple uses for it. Okay, and also you can separate out the different components, like this Amazon one, so your branding gets recognition in a couple different ways. Another way you might see a combo is an emblem mark, right? So that's very common in universities, and also the Starbucks icon is also one. And finally, you can have image marks, and that's basically kind of the ultimate goal of every business, right? That someone can recognize you just by your logo. If someone saw this swoosh, they'd instantly know that it's Nike. So a pictorial mark is just simply the image, right? Apple is another example. Another way you could do it is a mascot mark, like this MailChimp monkey. It represents the brand. Or you can have an abstract mark. This is good when you don't really have a clear image that would symbolize your business. So software companies commonly use this. Now let's take a little bit to look at good logos, and we'll also take a second to look at some bad ones too. And remember, we're just going through the overall idea of logos, but we will unpack this in a later webinar. So a good logo is going to be really easy to identify, right? Again, you want to make sure it's unique and special to your brand and that it clearly represents it. You also want to make sure that it's easy to read, because you don't want that problem of someone not being able to read your brand name, and that it uses color in a smart way. So a great example is this PetSmart logo, because where they have the red and the blue, you could read it as PetSmart or PetSmart. So it's a great connotation in both ways. Your logo should also translate well on different backgrounds. So it can be on black and white, it can be on color, it can be on photos, and it should be really easy to see and recognize, as well as on different sizes. So if it's really tiny, like on a favicon for your website, or if it's giant on a sign outside or on a billboard, you want to make sure that people can see it and understand it. And just like how every person is unique, you want to make sure your logo is unique, right? You don't want to be copying someone else. So these are just a few examples of what some good logos look like, and that they also would translate well if they were just plain black or plain white. And several of these have hidden meanings, so I'll give you a second to look at that. All right, on the flip side, a bad logo is really just confusing. Maybe it doesn't represent the brand, or it's easily dated, where in a couple years you're gonna have to update it anyway. So the first logo on the top, the AJ one, is kind of an example of that. You don't really understand if AJ is the company name, the name of the person, what kind of health coach, is it food, nutrition, wellness, mental? It's just not a great, exciting logo in that sense. Sometimes logos also are hard to read, or they don't use color very well. So this highlight logo, we thought was a good example of that, because it's honestly a little bit painful to look at. And also, a bad logo is one that has limited uses. Maybe it only looks good on a white background, or it copies another logo and is generic. So you want to be really careful about copying another logo or looking too similar, right? Because you could have some copyright issues or trademark issues. And again, you want to make sure that you're distinguished from others, right? You're trying to set yourself apart from the competition. And sometimes logos have hidden meanings in not so great of ways. So I'll give you a second to look at this last logo and see if you can see what's wrong with it. All right, did you catch it? That's probably one they wanted to retract right away. All right, we're gonna spend a little time on color now. So remember that color should really complement your brand. And really consider color psychology and theory, because that's how others will perceive the colors you choose. So think about how many fast food restaurants use the color red because it invokes a sense of hunger when someone sees it. And then think about how many spas use blue or green because it's natural, it's calming. But if you went to a spa that had red walls and red furniture, it would probably be too bold and distracting. You wouldn't get that nice, calm feeling. So to start, what we recommend is choose about 3 colors. One's going to be your primary color, the one that you're known for. One will be an accent. It's really great when you want to bring attention to a certain word or text or a button. And then one is a neutral base. That can be great for backgrounds, to spice things up so you're not just having black and white in your backgrounds all the time. Again, we could get into so much more detail with color, but this is just an overview, so we're going to move on to typography. So typography is really important because, again, it communicates with the voice, right? We talked about tone of voice earlier. So you want to make sure that the fonts that you choose work well both on printed materials and on the web, that they're easy to read, okay? So what's really common is that you might pair a serif font for your title with a sans serif font for the body. Sans serif is popular for a body font because it's easy to read. Now you don't want to go around choosing these beautiful fonts and not check and see if you need to obtain a license, because oftentimes there are restrictions that apply. You might have to buy a license, and so you don't want to go through all of this and choose these beautiful fonts and then find out you can't use them and have to redo all of this. So really make sure you check that. Some other tips are to avoid using too many fonts at one time or too many flourishes. You have bold fonts and italics and all caps all together in one little space. It's confusing to your reader, and it doesn't really direct their eyes to what you want them to focus on. So a good example is this one to the right. You can really see the title of it very clearly. All of it is easy to read. And then you kind of know based off of the color as well what they want you to click on. Now we're going to take a look at imagery, sorry. So take a look at these 2 photos and think about, where would you want to eat? All right, my guess is that most of you chose the photo on the right because it's clear, it's appetizing, it looks really good, you can see everything clearly. Whereas the photo on your left is blurry. You can't really see what exactly it is, and frankly, at least I don't think it looks that good. Now, ironically, these photos are actually from the same restaurant. So what we want to emphasize here for imagery, especially in photos, is that they're really, really clear. You want to take the time to invest in good photography. No one wants to look at a blurry photo because they have to kind of think about it, and no one wants to use up that mental energy. Okay, and especially for products, you want to have a beautiful photo that really showcases the product that you took so much time and energy to create. That's what's really going to sell it. Besides photography, imagery consists of icons and graphics. Again, that's the part of the personality of your brand. It shows the type of character that you have, and it's a great way to tell a story visually. So Nectar Creek is a great example. They make mead, but it's something that their customers may not really know about, or they have to educate them on, is the process of making mead. So what they have here is a nice little formula, so to speak, that to make mead, it really just boils down to honey, water, and fermentation. Nice, simple, and easy to understand. So imagery is really powerful as well. The last part that I'm going to talk about is tone and voice. Again, this carries into so many different parts of your brand and your marketing. So when you think about Geico, you see the cute little Geico gecko and his little British accent. You probably have a good little laugh at their commercial, and you understand kind of their overall tone and voice. Whereas with Allstate, you perceive them a little differently. Allstate is the caring, responsible neighbor, one that you could probably trust your kids with, right? Whereas with Geico, he's more the funny guy, someone that you could just relax and maybe grab a beer with. So again, tone and voice really feeds into the perception people have of your brand. So all of this combined affects and influences the products of your business. That's what branding does. So people often want to start with a website or start with a social media, but the reality of that is that you can't do that without first knowing the core and the character before you know the composition. A strong brand sends a strong and cohesive message. So you want to make sure you take the time to do all of this upfront and throughout the process of building your business. So remember, start with the core and character of your brand before you move into the composition. When you do that, you have substance to your brand. You have something that others can relate to and be loyal to, and you have a strong foundation to set yourself apart from your competition and lead a successful marketing campaign. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gabriel to talk about marketing.
Thank you, Kelly. That was really awesome, Kelly, and I really especially enjoyed the part about the blind date test. And building off of that, now that Kelly's really laid that foundation about your brand being, related to your personality, and if your brand were a person, we're going to take it a step further and figure out how to market that, how to basically all the vehicles that carry that message forward. And so let's go back to that date scenario and think about, after you've gone on that date, marketing is really all about creating that great experience, right? So if you've got your personality down, now you're ready to invite people in. Kelly mentioned that, it's kind of like the website is like your online brick and mortar. And so when you think about when people go into a store, they are thinking about the overall experience that they're having. And so you want to think about how you do this online. Let's say you're hosting an event, so to speak, quote unquote. Now you've got your personality, you're hosting an event that exemplifies your personality outward. You want to create a great experience. Think about it this way. What do we always say about restaurants? If you have two restaurants on the block and they both serve the same kind of food, you go for the food, but you stay for the atmosphere, right? You keep coming back because the ambiance is really nice. Come for the food, stay for the atmosphere. So that's essentially what we're trying to do with our brand, is we're trying to bring them in with our personality, but stay for something else, some sort of experience that we're giving them. If you're a service industry, right, then it's all about the great service that you provide. Maybe they come for the service, but they come back because your customer support is better than the next guy. To put it in perspective, if you've ever been to a website where you cannot find the phone number or how to reach out or how to contact them, that really breaks the experience. And if you had to reach out and do 34 emails when a 10-minute phone call would have fixed it, I'll tell you what, when a person comes, they come for that service, but they're going to return because your customer service is good. So crafting a good experience is important even if you're a service industry. And let's take it a step further with products. With products, if you and your competitor have the same product, but you're the one that makes it easy to understand, easy to grasp, easy to use, you've created a good experience for the person, right? So let's think about, how does this translate into websites? How does this translate into our online presence? How do we create a website that performs? Well, I like to always say it's all about asking yourself, can my website pass the grandma test? What's the grandma test, you might ask? Well, if you were to have, your 90-year-old Nana on your website, could she work that website? Could she navigate it without the help of the grandkids? See, crafting a good experience on an online platform like your website is about crafting a good user experience, getting them to navigate that website. Because user experience is actually one of the most important ranking factors, meaning that if you have a bad website and it's difficult for people to navigate, well, then guess what's going to happen? They're just going to leave. They're going to go on your website, not be able to figure out where to find the information, how to purchase the product, how to contact you, and they're going to leave. And so your competitor can actually outrank you if they have a better user experience, even if their products are inferior to yours. So don't get caught up with saying, oh, I have a great product, if you're not offering a great experience. It's really important that when they go to your website, they're able to go from point A to point B in as few steps and as easy as possible. And so the way to do this is consider a thing called the cognitive load. What this means is that when we develop any sort of marketing and when we're putting our brand message out there, we want to do it in such a way that people receiving that information are using as little mental effort required to accomplish any task or to understand the information. The human brain burns an average of 320 calories on a typical day. I'm getting tired just thinking about that. So when you think about it, the best thing for you to do is figure out how you can put a lot of information into a simplified form. The best way to do this is if you can say it visually rather than with a lot of text. That's the way to go. Let's go back to Kelly's example from Nectar Creek. They were able to, in 4 images, tell the process of mead making. I mean, you could make a whole video or you could write a whole blog about it, talking about going from gathering the honey, mixing the water, letting it ferment, making mead. But think about just even me simplifying it that way, how much text that would have taken. Whereas the icons, you get it, you grasp it easily. So if you can say something visually rather than with lots of text, that's the way to go. Now, that's not to say you should just abandon using text at all, but if you can condense something down into a visual medium, that is the way to go. If you can use a photo, videos are really hot right now, because think about this. Let's say your sink breaks and you don't want to call a plumber, so you jump on YouTube, right? So a 10-minute video is much better than a 40-page manual. I don't know about you, but I'm going to take the YouTube video anytime rather than having to pour through, a lot of, a huge user manual. But even think, user manuals do use diagrams. There's a reason for that. Infographics, charts are a great way to get the information out there, especially if it's complex information about analytics or things like that. Also, the use of buttons. A hyperlink can be buried in text, but a button gives you the ability to use different precursors and things like that within branding. Like Kelly was talking about color psychology. Let's say you've got a big bright red button. It's going to invoke the feeling of immediacy, and you can create a strong call to action rather than just a long URL string. You can say something like, let's get started, or sign up now. Another way to do this is to use negative space. And what this means is that let the page breathe. Don't try to cram a lot of information in there. Think about this slide right here that you're looking at. Your eyes can drift over to the right, and the orange brings out the information, the quote over there, and then your eyes can breathe over the white space and going back to the left. So it's really important that you give people the ability to kind of have a mental break from one piece of information to the other as their eyes bounce back and forth. Use that negative space to your advantage. Don't just try to cram as much as you can in there, because that's going to really make people use their brain too much, and it's going to hurt and they're going to leave. And lastly, just say it simply. Remember, you know your business inside and out, but your customer doesn't. Your audience doesn't. So really simplify it. Make it as simple as possible. Don't use insider baseball. If you guys are not familiar with this, this just means that, people in the baseball world, if you guys have ever never heard this, they talk about all these different things about baseball, RBIs and different things like that. And people that don't know anything about that don't understand. So it's really important for you to bring it in and say, look, that just means the guy hits, and I actually don't know what that means because I'm not much of a sporty guy, but exactly, that's the point, is that they haven't made it simple enough for me. That's why that expression is out there, because baseball is complicated to understand if you're not in that world, and your business is complicated to understand if people aren't in that world. So bring them in and make it simple for them to use. So let's talk about how we lighten the load a little bit and how we create a website that converts. So what we want to do here is we want to give people key pieces of information as quickly as we possibly can. We want them to know right when they navigate to our site who we are, and that means who are you, what kind of business are you, what kind of business do you do, what are the things that you do, how can you provide value or benefit to your users, and how is that benefit or how's that value different from your competition? How's it better? And then finally, if you've done your job well and you've got them enticed by the who and the how, then they're going to want to know what actions that they need to take to get that value. So I'm going to show you a real world example here, a really easy way to see this. This is SEO Press. It's a plugin, an SEO plugin I use, and I really think this is a great example because you get all the information without even having to touch the scroll wheel on your mouse. That shows just how little cognitive energy you have to use. I know immediately that this is an SEO plugin, that it will improve my traffic, and so you're seeing the value right away. I'm going to improve my traffic, and it goes beyond that. It's simple, it's fast, it's powerful. And so I know who they are and what they do, right? I know that they're an SEO plugin. I know that they are a plugin that helps me to improve my traffic. I know the benefit over the competition is that it's simple, it's fast, it's powerful. And then here's the thing. Now I'm enticed, and I know I want to act. Well, I don't know how to act unless I look right there and it says download the free version or get the pro version, or even at the top it says get it now. I like that SEO Press has even gone above and beyond on this concept. I don't even have to scroll down to find the pricing. I know that the free version is $0 and the pro version is $39 for unlimited sites. I've gotten all the information even if I never look at any other piece of their website. So that's very, very impressive to me. And so it's really important that you make sure that you have a strong call to action right there to get them in and get them to know how to act and how to convert. So now that we've figured out how to create a website that converts, let's talk about how we get them to your website, because we're not all Kevin Costner, build it and they will come. If you guys don't get that 80s reference, then I don't know what to tell you. We can't be friends. Not really. But what I want to do is talk about how, if we build it, how do we get them to come? Let's Kevin Costner this thing. All right, so how you get to be discovered is, remember that your customer is going to go through things called the phases of intent. Simply what this means is that people ask certain questions in a certain order before they're ready to buy. I'll give you an example. If you've ever gone to see a movie, the first thing that you do is you find a movie, you see a trailer, and you go, what is this? Like, who's in it? What is this? Who made this? What studio is this coming from? Then you go, you're going to say, oh, this looks enjoyable. Well, how is it doing in the box office? How is the critical reaction to it? Are the critics liking it? How are people reacting to it? Then you might say, well, that looks good. Okay. Well, when is it showing? And finally, once you figured all that out, if you really want to go see that movie, you're going to go, where is it showing? Is it at Stadium 16? Is it at AMC? Where can I go to watch this movie? So to simplify this, what this means is that people are going from the top to the bottom in the direction of how they ask the questions to get to your site. At the what and who stage, they're just mildly interested, they're curious, their wallet may as well be at home. But by the time they get to the where, they might as well have their wallet out and ready to hand it to you. And so in order to understand this a little bit better, basically what this means is that we want to create content that answers these different key component questions to lead them to the where ultimately being your website and the place that you want to create that action. First, they're going to go, what is it that you do? And they're just curious. And maybe they're on, so social media is big for this. This is why I tell people don't just market on social media, because there's a lot of distraction. And when they're scrolling through, all they're going to do is go, well, what is this? Oh, I was scrolling through, what is this? But maybe they click on it and they see, oh, how does this benefit me? How is it different from the competition? How does it compare to what I'm already using? And then if it's event-based, when is it? When can I go? And then finally, if they're really interested, they're going to go, okay, I got to get to your website. Where can I buy this? I want this now. So if you can solve that problem, that's the way to do it. So the way to do this, again, is to create that content. I think a lot of people are afraid to do this because they're afraid that if they give the person the farm, they're just going to run off and do it themselves. And the truth is 81% of users conduct research about products and services before they make a purchase. And so it may be tempting to think, well, if I give them the research, if I give them the information, they're going to go elsewhere. But I want to let you know that if you give them what they want, if you give them the information that they're craving, you're going to build trust. You're going to be the name that they remember. You're going to be the face of that trustworthy person that's giving them the information to help them and lead them along the way to success, to successfully getting a good service, to getting a good product. And remember, the ones that are true DIYers are going to be the people that, we all know that person who's like, look, I'm just going to do it myself because I'm cheap. I don't want to pay any money to do this. And then there's the next category of person that may be wanting to save a buck or maybe wants to understand a little bit more about it. They start it, they realize, you know what, time is money. It's too time consuming. It's not worth my time. I'd rather just hire somebody. And then the last person is going to do the research and it's going to lead them right into a sale. The first person is not your target audience. You don't want to reduce your price down to capture the person that's going to DIY. Let them DIY, because one segment of those people are going to are going to be the type of person that's, once they learn about it, they're going to see your value even more because they've tried it on their own. Again, going back to the sink example, sorry about that. Going back to the sink example, I look on YouTube, I'm on there, I'm trying to figure out how to fix the sink, and then I realize, you know what, it's worth it to just hire. I totally get why it's $300 to call a plumber, because I don't want to tear a hole in my wall, I don't want to have a huge leak, I don't want to have to do this, deal with all the consequences. So remember, giving them the information is the way to go. Now, how do you promote your content? Well, it's important to remember that you choose the right platforms. So don't just be on every social site just because you think you need to be, just because you think, I got to be on social media. Ask yourself, where does my audience hang out? If you're a visual-based company and you're targeting a younger demographic, then Instagram is the way to go. Maybe you're trying to be more casual and you want to be kind of in that social hangout. Maybe Facebook is the way to go. Maybe you're more professional and you're dealing with businesses and LinkedIn is the way to go. Don't just throw your net into every one, because, not every lake has the same kind of fish. And so ask yourself, where do they hang out? Also note that the most important part of this, more important than anything, is consistency. So maybe you need to be multiple platforms. Maybe you're one of those companies that actually does do well on multiple platforms. Well, remember that you can always grow into other platforms, but if you can't stick to a schedule, doing Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube and everything like that, do not put yourself into that, because what's going to happen is you're going to get burnout. You're not going to be able to stick to that schedule. You're not going to be able to post content regularly, and your audience is going to tune out because they can't count on you. You're not seen as reliable. It's more important that you can consistently post on one platform than you're inconsistent upon multiple platforms. So consistency is key. Be honest with yourself. Choose a schedule you can stick to. Post content regularly. And finally, know that you can grow into these other platforms. Like I said before, let's say you're just killing it on Instagram and you should have been on Facebook from the beginning, but now you're making more revenue. Well, hire somebody now to be able to handle that other platform so you can grow into it. Maybe you should be doing videos, but you just haven't had the means to do it. Grow into those other platforms. Make content. And a good strategy to do is make content that works in multiple platforms. Maybe you start with a blog and you get a whole series of blogs out there. And then maybe after you've got a little bit more time or resources, you can take that blog and it's a script. Now you can use that blog and create it to make it into a video or a podcast. Or an infographic. Maybe it's something that's like top 10 tips to a better lifestyle, right? You can turn that into an infographic or some charts and things like that, and share it upon multiple platforms that way. So these are just a couple things to think about. Now, lastly, what I'd like to talk about is how to generate leads. So a lot of people say, great, I've got the content out there, I've been honest with myself, I'm posting on the right spots. Well, how do I get people that I can continuously post to? So think about it this way. We all think about our customer acquisition costs. It's more expensive to acquire a new customer than to just scratch the back of the customer you already have. But if you are going to go after new customers, offer them something. Don't just throw on your website, subscribe to my newsletter. And a better tactic to do would say, let's say you have a blog that's the top 10, like let's go back to the top 10, health tips. Let's say you're a health and wellness coach and you have a nutritional guide, right? Give them maybe a PDF document. Say, you give me your email and I'll send you a free, basic workout starter kit, like a little PDF that just gives them like 10 workouts to get started. And then remember that you want that content that you continuously send them through email and through your different channels to be similar in nature to what drew them in the first place. Don't draw them in with those nutritional facts and then or those workout facts and then just start talking all about, the latest and greatest, workout guru guy and his lifestyle, or, don't change the game. Keep it similar. If you brought them in with those nutritional facts, keep giving them things similar to that. Keep giving them more tips on how to maintain a healthy lifestyle, or make sure that if you do want to give them new content, that you can pivot into it. Maybe you want to start talking about health and wellness of the brain and the soul. Like you want to talk about like how to live an enriched lifestyle. Maybe you drew them in with good food and good diet tips and good workout tips, but you want us to talk about work-life balance or a healthy psychological mindset. Make sure that you can transition into that fluidly and it's similar to what you brought them in with, so it doesn't confuse your audience. Going back to what Kelly was talking about, make sure you don't have multiple personality disorder, that you're just switching what you're talking about just because you're wanting to grab someone else that you haven't grabbed before. So anyway, with that, I want to go ahead and put it back to Kelly as we wrap up here and kind of bring this all together.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much for sticking with us. Again, this was the first in our series and we're excited to bring more content to you. And if you found that this webinar was valuable to you and you want to learn more about branding and marketing, we're going to be presenting a branding and website strategies for startups this coming Tuesday evening, the 24th. So if you're in the Lynn area, really consider coming to this. You can register through the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. And we'll even send a link here when we take a break in the chat box so you can access that and get more info there. And then if you aren't able to attend or you don't live in the area and want our assistance in putting these practices into place, please schedule a consultation with us. Just because we work out of the Albany, Oregon area doesn't mean that we can't hop on a call or do a video chat or something and talk to you that way. We would love to learn about what you're doing and how we can help. So again, you can contact us through the link in the chat box, which we're going to share here in a second, or just simply go to our website, benewcreative.com, and reach out to us there. We'd love to hear from you. And then finally, if you found this webinar helpful, please share it with others. We want them to know this information. It's not secret. And invite them to attend our upcoming webinars. All right, so the last few minutes left, we're going to take a short break and look through your questions, and then we'll be back in a couple seconds.
Yeah, and while we're taking this break, if you haven't gotten your questions in now's the time to put those in the chat box, because this is just your last chance to get those questions in, and we'll address as many as we can.
All right, we'll be back in a second. All right, so we're going to go ahead and enter into the Q&A session for these last couple of minutes here. If we don't get to your question, feel free to reach out to us, contact us, or even meet up with us. We'd be happy to answer these questions. And again, there are ongoing resources as well. All right, so one of the first questions we have is, are there considerations for load times that would also result in bad experiences? How do you identify what a user might be facing on their end? And then along those lines, do you need to provide text as a backup to graphics not displaying quickly?
This is an absolutely great question. And so, absolutely. I mean, the answer to the question, this is a lot to unpack, so I'm going to try to do this as best I can here. So the first part of your question, considerations for load time that would result in a bad experience. Yes. So you want to kind of get between 3 and 5 seconds. The real goal is about 4 seconds if you're making consideration for like voice searches that are becoming more popular. And the reason why this is because remember that you may have a good internet connection, but not everybody does. So if you're loading at 3 to 5 seconds, let's just say 4 as an average, and somebody is in a bad load spot and it takes 6 or 8 seconds, they're going to know that they're in a bad spot and they're going to hang with you. But if yours is loading on an average of like 8 to 10 seconds, and then you increase another 2 or 3 seconds for bad internet, nobody's going to sit around and wait for that to buffer or to load for that additional time. They're going to leave. So it's absolutely one of the most vital parts of user experience is absolutely load time. And then to identify what the user might be experiencing on their end is just seeing this buffering wheel, or nothing's loading, or that if you're on your mobile device where that little bar is going across, they're not really, they know that something's there, but it's just not coming up, and it can be very infuriating to your user. So be conscientious of that. And then
just to add to that really quickly, because when you're in your own environment, it can be hard. So sometimes you might go in your incognito mode,
right?
So you don't have that caching issue. If you're out and about and you're trying different Wi-Fi's, that could be a good way to kind of test what your user is experiencing. So those are other ways, I'd say.
Right, and you can also use, here, I'll just put it in the chat box here, gtmetrics.com is a great place to test what your load speeds actually are. And like Kelly was talking about, search in incognito mode, and that way you can kind of get a better feel for if graphics and things are actually loading. And then the last part that you're talking about, yes, providing text as a backup. There's a thing called alt tags, and basically what you want to do is you just want to put an alternative tag into your photos. WordPress makes this very easy. Just go into your media files and add what's called an alt tag. And you want to do this for 2 reasons. One is actually, like some people have different kinds of internet connections or different kinds of browser processes that the graphics actually won't display, and it's not because of your website, it's just that's the way that theirs is. And a lot of times this is for hearing impaired people who need screen readers, visually impaired people or hearing impaired people. Like visually impaired people need a screen reader to be able to, if they're reading through that content, to know what that graphic is that's there. So make that alt tag very specific so that when it reads it out, it's not just some random string of lines. Don't just get caught up in putting tons of keywords. Actually explain what the graphic is. And also note that there were some lawsuits that happened with some bigger companies who didn't take care of their alt tags, and the visually impaired community felt that was not ADA compliant. It wasn't made for them, and they felt alienated. So you can actually, as you grow and become bigger, that can actually become a legal hassle as well. So yeah, great question there. And I hope that answered your question. If you need any more information about that, please reach out to me personally, and I'd be happy to walk you through some of the steps of checking it and then figuring out how to put those alt tags in there. Let's see. We have another question.
Okay.
How do I make sure the brand I create when I start is the one that I want long term, and if my brand appeals to my target market? This is a fantastic question.
Yeah, it is a good one. It's probably the last one that we'll have time to do, but it's a really important one. And the reality is it's kind of a complex answer. Because the reality is that you have to start somewhere, right? And that's why we really took all this time, this webinar, to say research, get to know your brand, take the time before you even start your business or invest in it is a great time too. If you already have a business, that's fine. You can continue researching because, you know, all these various factors, the economy changes, your target audience changes their mood or something like that, right? Their interests change. So you have to be able to adapt and maneuver with it. That being said, if you do take that time in the beginning to develop a strong foundation for your brand, then you have something to work off of. Starbucks is a great example. Look them up. You know, they started in a little tiny coffee shop at Pike Place. Their logo looks a little different. You can see the evolution of their logo, but the core concept and feel of them has stayed the same. So we really recommend taking that time in the beginning and also throughout to make sure your brand stays consistent.
Yeah, and I would add to that too that, you know, it's really important, like Kelly was talking about in the beginning in the branding part, that you really do reflect on those values and your mission from the very beginning. Because, you know, as you pivot and as your company grows, it is going to evolve, but hopefully your mission and your values will be relatively the same from when you started. I like to use the analogy of, you know, when you think about when we're kids, we get certain values and morals instilled into us, and we've all known that person that, you know, or were that person ourselves that, you know, hit teenager, hit the adolescence, hit the early 20s, kind of deviated from who we were because we were trying to impress people, because we were trying to get the girl or the guy, whatever it may be. We were compromising our own values to be able to appease other people. And, you know, you generally see people kind of go through that phase and then they come back, and they, you know, as they get older, they kind of get that resurgence of going back to their roots of who they were morally and as value and their values. So what I'd say to that is just ensure that every step of the way that you're never compromising those values, and you're thinking about those in every direction that you take your brand and your marketing. Because yes, you will grow up, you will mature, you'll learn different things about your business. You'll say different things that you did when you first started as to when you come in, but hopefully the core of that message remains the same. And so that way, another thing I want to add to this is that, you know, whoever said opposites attract, I do not agree with that. Think about your friend groups. Likes attract likes. And so if you're true to your core message, you're going to attract people, the type of people that you want. If you're not, you may attract a lot of people. You may be successful in the short term, but after a while, you're going to get burnout. They're going to realize that you're not authentic. And that's a big thing. Be authentic from the very beginning. Be true to yourself. And that way, you know, you don't get burnout, and you don't kind of start down this road and then you lose steam because you're not being true to who you are. Attract the people that are like you. They will resonate with your message. They will resonate with your mission, and they will want to be part of what's bigger.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're going to have to wrap up now. If you had a question that you didn't get to ask, again, feel free to contact us. There's that link in that chat box. Check out that event on Facebook. We'd love to see you in person and meet with you.
Those links are also going to be down in the video description as well. So if you need more, there's also some additional resources that are in that as well. And after this, I'll add some more if need be for some of these specific questions like GT metrics and things like that. So
yeah, and we'll be sending you guys the recap. We'll have some resources in that as well for sticking with us this webinar.